We have newborn screening state experience of Arizona. Would you please welcome Fran Altmaier?
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to speak today about Arizona and our experience in implementing screening for the XALD. I'll start just a little about newborn screening history in Arizona. So we've only been screening since about 1994 in our state, and back then it was only for 7 conditions. In 2001, we added CAH screening. 2005, we expanded to the 29 conditions that were on the RUSP. And then there was not another condition added until 2019 when we added screening for SCID. And then in 2021, we added RUSP alignment legislation. So everything that's added to the RUSP, we will add to our screening panel. So Arizona at a glance. So in 2022, we had just over 79,000 babies born. We're a diverse state with very diverse demographics. We're a very big state geographically, with most of our population centered in Phoenix and Tucson. We have over 25 Native American communities in our state. We border Mexico to the south, so we lose a lot of families that come up, deliver, and go home to Mexico. We also have Colorado City, which has its own unique challenges on the border of Utah with that community. We have very rural and remote areas, and then we also have our centralized big cities. Arizona is a 2-screen state, so every baby has their first screening between 24 and 36 hours before they leave the hospital, and then between 5 and 10 days of age, they have a second newborn screening completed. And those are typically done at the pediatrician's office or at a commercial laboratory. So our road to RUSP alignment legislation. It started in 2020. A bill was floated. We had some parent advocates and some adult males who had ALD, and they really advocated for adding SMA and XALD to the panel. And that was really their focus, was to get those 2 conditions added to our panel. And so it led to a bill being floated in 2020, the year of COVID, and it was to introduce the RUSP alignment. As in most states, everything died in 2020, and so that bill failed and ended that session. In 2021, it was reintroduced again, and it had momentum. It moved along. It included both RUSP alignment, but also our ability to pay for screenings, because all of that up until that point was in statute. And so we would have to go to the legislature to get a fee increase to be able to afford to even do the screenings. And so the bill kind of hung out there for a little while, and then it stalled. And so we got a little nervous that maybe it's not going to go anywhere. And at the very end of the legislative session in June, when they were doing their end of session sort of bargaining, it got thrown in there. Now they kind of pulled out the financial piece, but they did pass the RUSP alignment. So we were very grateful to be able to make sure that things are added to the panel, but our next thing is how do we pay for this? So one challenge at a time. So with that, it passed the end of June of 2021, and then we had until January 1st of 2022 to begin screening for SMA and XALD. Super short timeline to add testing. And so we were going to do everything we could to get that done. So with that, we had SMA was kind of an easy one. We were able to multiplex that with our current SCID testing, and so that was kind of an easy one. Then the next was the XALD screening, because that required different instruments than we already had, or different testing panels. So we had to set out, was our plan, to initially get things started while we waited for lab instruments to be delivered and installed, for validations to happen. And so that took us almost a year to get that all completely up and running. But we did make our timeline. January 1st of 22, we added both SMA and XALD to our panel and we started testing. So initially, we sent all our samples after we completed our in-house testing for the other conditions. All those samples were FedExed to PerkinElmer to have the XALD screenings done. We did all that send out until the end of March of 2022 when we brought our first tier back in-house. So that shortened up our timeline for being able to release results and things like that, but we still had the second tier to contend with. And so we continued to send out our second tier testing to PerkinElmer until January of this year, or the end of December of 2022. Our current testing protocol. So we screen on both the first and the second screen. And our first tier, we use the NeoBase 2, measuring the C26, and our cutoff is 0.55. We also have our second tier screening for those that need reflex, and we're doing the C26 in the negative ion mode. And that we have a cutoff of 0.15. So our follow-up protocols. An abnormal screen, so if we have one abnormal screen, we repeat on the second screen. If it is normal on that second screen, that baby is considered a normal screen. If it's abnormal a second time, then we refer to genetics. So our first true positive case came really quickly in our very first week of screening. We had a male, his first screen was his C26 was 0.54, his second screen was 0.37. I've got listed his ABCD1 genes, he was homozygous for a likely pathogenic variant. And then his very long chain fatty acids were also very elevated. Month 2, our first false positive case. This little guy, his first screen was normal. So if you remember, I said we do 2 positives and then we get a referral. So his first screen was normal, his second screen came back, and that was abnormal. So then we requested a third screen, sort of a tiebreaker screen. Which direction are we going to go, referral or not? And so that was also elevated. So we did make that referral to genetics. He was seen in the genetics clinic. They did not send for the ABCD1 genes. They did very long chain fatty acids and plasma testing, and those were considered normal. Then we had another false positive case. So during month 4 of testing, we had another female who had, again, a normal first screen, an abnormal second screen, an abnormal third screen, so we did that referral. This baby, they did do genetic testing, which was negative. She did have a benign pseudodeficiency. Then we had our second and third together. So we had a set of twins that were born, and they both had abnormal first screens and abnormal second screens. They were also referred to genetics, and you can see what their genes were with a likely pathogenic variant, consistent with XALD. Then we didn't have anything until month 11 of testing, and we had another female, and so we are still waiting on the genetics to come back on this little girl. And so far in 2023, we have had no cases flagged positive on both screens, so we are still waiting. And like everything, I think I've heard people talk yesterday at the lab thing, things come in clusters. You don't see anything for a while, and then you will get several all at once. So there's no predicting, but we're very confident in our follow-up protocols, and our genetics team is ready and waiting. We do know of a cousin. We were reached out, when newborn screening, we all communicate with each other. There was a baby who flagged positive in another state. That state called me and said, "Hey, Fran, all their little baby boy cousins live in Phoenix. What do we do?" And so because of that cousin in another state, we were able to get them connected with Phoenix Children's, and one of the little boys was positive, but he was born before we did screening. So screening is catching families of these kids. So our challenges. We have challenges. We don't have a long-term follow-up program in Arizona. So we follow those kids only up until their diagnosis. And so what we're going to run into is figuring out, keeping track of these little ones, what's their age of onset, what are their symptoms, what do we do to support these families? Our program just doesn't have the resources at the moment to be able to do that. And coordination of care. I'm a social worker. I always like to make sure people are connected with things, that they have what they need to be able to support their baby and their family. And our program doesn't currently have that. So that's one of our goals for the future, is to be able to make sure that we have those things to connect families with resources. The other thing is coordination of care. It's interesting, in our state, everybody wants to lead the care for that baby, and there's been conversations with our specialists at our large children's hospital who should lead the team in caring for these little boys that are identified with ALD. Should it be genetics? Should it be neurology? Should it be endocrinology? And then how do they coordinate those referrals and make sure they're connected with the care providers they need when they need them? So those are things that we're still working out in our state because we're relatively new. And any questions about how we're doing in Arizona? Thank you.